Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravanakshani Nirvishesha Shunyavadhyasya Om Jnanatimarandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Jnana Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakapatiri Sakripasanduvi Chapaticham Pavani Vaishnavi Namo Namaha Hare Krishna. So we are reading from the Ramayana, and thank you very much for inviting me to join the reading. We're at the very end of the Ramayana, so we can all have our tissues nearby in case we need them. What an amazing epic. We ended on page 530. Is there anyone that wants to confirm that?
I think that's the one we ended on.
Do you think that's the one? Okay. So should I start now?
Yes, Mataji.
Okay. So this is when Lord Ram has heard that there's rumors going around about Sita's chastity. And so he is talking to his brother Lakshman. He says, Lakshman, tomorrow at dawn, you must take Sita to the banks of the Ganga and take her on a tour of the ashrams of the great rishis. Then abandon her near the hermitage of the great sage Valmiki on the banks of the river Tamasa and return to Ayodhya alone. My dear brother, you must carry out this order without any argument, for any slight hesitation on your part will bring me the greatest displeasure. Indeed, let it be known that anyone who objects to my decision immediately becomes my most bitter enemy. Just a little while ago, Sita told me she is very eager to visit all the ashrams along the banks of the Ganga. Now go and fulfill her desire. Lakshman became broken-hearted to hear Rama speak like this. However, since he was the obedient servant of his elder brother, he assented without hesitation. Then early the next morning, Lakshman went to Sita and said, Your husband has ordered me to fulfill your desire. I shall escort you to the banks of the Ganga so that you can worship the great rishis residing there. Sumantra is ready with the chariot, so I request you to come at once. Sita was delighted, and after putting on her finest dress and most exquisite jewelry, she told Lakshman, I shall distribute these and other gifts to the wives of the great sages. Lakshman helped Sita onto the chariot, and they quickly departed. However, while going along, Sita began to speak anxiously, saying, Oh, Lakshman, my left eye has suddenly begun to twitch, and my mind feels strangely uneasy. Suddenly, I feel very weak, and the earth seems to have taken a gloomy aspect. I hope Rama is all right. Sita prayed to the demigods for the welfare of her husband and other relatives. Lakshman then said in a voice choked with tears, I hope you too will not meet with misfortune. By evening, Sita, Lakshman, and Sumantra reached the banks of the river Gomati and spent the night there. Early the next morning, they continued their journey. By afternoon, they came to the banks of the Ganga. Upon dismounting their chariot, however, Lakshman broke down and cried, for he could no longer contain his grief. Feeling great concern, Sita inquired, Oh, Lakshman, what is wrong? Now that we have reached our destination, you should be happy. Indeed, your sadness makes me uneasy. Have just 2 days of separation from Rama brought you so much anguish? I love Rama dearly, yet I have not become so disturbed. Please compose yourself, for we must now cross the Ganga to have the audience of the great rishis. Thereafter, we can quickly return to Ayodhya, for I also long to see Rama." After wiping the tears from his eyes, Lakshman arranged for a boat and escorted Sita across the Ganga. Upon reaching the other side, Lakshman tearfully confessed, "O Princess of Vidarbha, the all-good Lord Rama has entrusted me with a most painful task. Indeed, by performing this duty, I shall become infamous in the eyes of the world. It would have been better if I had died rather than execute your husband's order. O noble lady, please forgive me for what I am being forced." Lakshman fell to the ground, weeping bitterly. With great indignation, Sita asked, "O Lakshman, what is the matter? I cannot understand what you are saying. Please tell me clearly what is troubling you. Has some great misfortune befallen Rama that you do not have the courage to tell me?" With his head bowed low, Lakshman replied in a voice choked with tears. While sitting in the royal court, Rama learned that rumors were circulating throughout Ayodhya, accusing him of impropriety. Everywhere, people blame Rama for accepting you back. This public censure pains him unbearably. "O Sita, I know that you are faultless, and so does Rama. Therefore, do not misunderstand the king, for he has been forced to relinquish you to maintain the good name of the Ikshvaku dynasty. O Princess of Vidarbha, do not be broken-hearted, for the abodes of the Brahmarshis that are situated in the banks of the Ganga are celestially beautiful. You should take shelter of the great sage Valmiki, for he was a good friend of your father-in-law, Maharaj Dasarath. Always think of Rama within your heart and remain unflinchingly devoted to him. In this way, you will attain the highest happiness, O Janaki." Upon hearing her cruel destiny, Sita immediately fainted. Then, coming to her senses, she pitifully cried out, "Now I can see that this life was awarded to me simply for suffering. What great sin did I commit in the past? What poor girl's marriage did I obstruct to now cause Rama to cast me off? I faithfully followed my husband into exile and remained content, despite innumerable hardships. O Lakshman, how shall I be able to survive here alone? What will I tell the rishis when they ask me why I was abandoned? What wrong have I done? I would gladly end my life by throwing myself into the Ganga, but that would bring about the end of Rama's dynasty." Becoming somewhat more composed, Sita told Lakshman, "I know that you are merely carrying out your duty. I do not blame you. Go back to Ayodhya now and offer my respect to my mothers-in-law. Touch the feet of my husband and please deliver the following message. O Rama, you know that my devotion has always been fixed upon you without deviation. You know of my chastity and my unfailing love. Still, from fear of dishonor and shame, you have spurned me. O Rama, my lord and only refuge, you should not have done so. My dear husband, I do not grieve for my own misfortune, for I know that I am faultless. For a chaste woman, the husband is as good as God. Therefore, I must accept whatever you may order is best for my welfare, even if it means giving up my life." Lakshman circumambulated Sita and crossed the Ganga opposite shore. As Lakshman mounted his chariot, he turned his head just to have one last glimpse of Sita. Likewise, Sita gazed sorrowfully at Lakshman as he receded into the distance. Then, alone and unprotected, Sita fell on the ground, crying uncontrollably. Grief-stricken Lakshman said, "O Sumantra, what terrible pain Rama will have to suffer now that he has abandoned his dear wife. Alas, he who wrathfully destroyed the Rakshasas appeared to be himself ruled by cruel destiny. The sorrow Rama will feel shall far exceed what he experienced while living in exile under the order of his father. Sumantra replied, O Prince, do not become overly aggrieved because of Sita or Rama. Long ago, your father was informed that one day Rama would have to abandon his wife and suffer the pangs of separation for the remainder of his life. O Lakshman, I promised your father that I would never disclose all of this. However, since you have inquired about Rama's misfortune, I shall tell you everything. I should certainly obey the king's order, but it appears that fate is indeed supreme. For I feel impelled to speak. However, please do not repeat any of this to Bharata or Satrughna. Lakshman exclaimed, O Sumantra, please disclose everything. Sumantra said, O Prince, once upon a time, Durvasa Muni resided at the ashram of Vishishta during the 4 months of the rainy season to execute the required penances for that season. One day, when Maharaj Dasarath came to visit Vishishta, he saw Durvasa Muni seated by the rishi's side. Thus, he respectfully worshipped both sages. In turn, the 2 rishis welcomed Maharaj Dasarath and invited him to sit down with them. In the course of their conversation, Maharaj Dasarath asked about his own longevity, along with that of his sons. Durvasa Muni told him, My dear king, once long ago, when the Daityas were hard-pressed in battle against the demigods, they took shelter of Bhrigu Muni's wife, for she had previously assured them of protection. Seeing this, Lord Vishnu became enraged, and by employing his Sudarshan chakra, he severed the head of the ascetic woman. In retaliation, Bhrigu Muni angrily cursed Lord Vishnu to be born upon the earth as a human being and suffer the pangs of separation from his wife. After venting his anger in this way, however, Bhrigu Muni became sorry. Repentantly, he began to worship Lord Vishnu. The Lord became satisfied with Bhrigu Muni, and he voluntarily agreed to accept the consequences of the rishi's curse. My dear Dasarath, it is for this reason that Lord Vishnu has appeared as your son, Rama, from Ayodhya. He will rule over the earth for 11,000 years, and his 2 sons will be born unto him through the womb of his beloved wife, Janaki. Sumantra then said, My dear Lakshman, all this was foretold by the great sage Durvasa to your father. Now you should give up your grief, knowing well that whatever takes place is in accordance with the will of the Supreme Lord. Hearing Sumantra's words, Lakshman felt great relief and expressed his sincere gratitude to the chief minister. Lakshman and Sumantra passed the night on the banks of the river, and the next morning resumed their journey. Some disciples of Valmiki happened to see Sita weeping, and they ran to their master, saying, "O master, come quickly. There is a woman who resembles the goddess of fortune herself, sitting alone in the forest crying." By dint of his mystic power, Valmiki could understand everything. He rushed to the place where the bereaved Sita sat. The rishi humbly approached her and said, "O devoted wife of Lord Rama, O daughter of King Janaka, by the strength of my austerities, I know all that takes place within the 3 worlds. Thus, I understand your plight. Please do not be afraid. Near my ashram, there are ascetic women who will devotedly care for you as if you were their daughter. Please come with me now and consider this to be your new home." Valmiki then took Sita and placed her under the care of the female ascetics. Meanwhile, Lakshman arrived at Ayodhya. Wondering what he would say, he entered the royal palace. Lakshman saw Rama seated upon the throne, shedding tears and lost in deep contemplation. Seeing his elder brother's pitiful condition, Lakshmana's eyes also filled with tears. Bowing down before Lord Rama, Lakshmana addressed him in a voice laden with great sorrow. My dear brother, in accordance with your order, I abandoned Sita on the banks of the Ganga, near the ashram of the great sage Valmiki. O Rama, there is no use giving way to grief. Indeed, in this world, meeting and separation are concomitant factors. It is inevitable that one's wife, one's son, and one's very life must one day be given up. Therefore, intelligent persons always pass through life's journey with an attitude of detachment. My dear brother, your unlimited prowess controls the three worlds. Why then do you not suppress this despondency? Cast off this weakness. Otherwise, more rumors will circulate. What will people think? Rama became pacified by Lakshman's words, and his grief gradually faded. Rama said, My dear Lakshman, for the last 4 days, I have completely neglected my royal duties. Please summon all the royal ministers, priests, and people in general with whom you do business. The king who does not look daily at the state administration is certainly doomed to suffer in hell. You must know the story of King Nirga. He once gave away millions of cows in charity to a Brahmana. But one of them happened to belong to another Brahmana. When they discovered this discrepancy, the Brahmanas cursed the king to become a lizard. It was ordained that King Nirga would be delivered in the distant future when Lord Vishnu would appear as the son of Vasudeva in the line of Yadu. Even now, that great king suffers because of the Brahmana's curse. Thus it can be understood just how much misery can be incurred due to a king's injustice. Therefore, let all people come to me who seek my audience. My dear brother, if you wish, I can entertain you with other interesting histories regarding the lives of great kings. Lakshman replied, My dear Rama, the more I listen to these wonderful stories, the more I am eager to continue hearing. In response, Rama narrated the history of King Nimi. This 12th son of Ikshvaku once asked Vashishta to officiate at his sacrifice. However, because Vashishta was already engaged in performing a sacrifice on behalf of Indra, he requested Maharaj Nimi to wait. But instead of waiting, Maharaj Nimi appointed Gautama as his sacrificial priest. When Vashishta learned of this, he came to the king and cursed him to die. In retaliation, Maharaj Nimi cursed Vashishta to die, and therefore they were both forced to relinquish their material bodies. Vashishta then approached Lord Brahma, who advised him to enter the semen about to be discharged by Mitra and Varuna. Vashishta quickly went to the shore of the ocean where Mitra and Varuna were residing. Just at that time, the beautiful Apsara Urvasi came by. Becoming overwhelmed by lust, Varuna pleaded with Urvasi to accept him. But Urvasi replied that Mitra was first to beg union with her. At this, Varuna declared, O beautiful one, if you do not accept my embraces at once, I shall discharge my semen into the celestial pitcher. Being pleased by the statement of ardent love, Urvasi replied, My dear Varuna, although my body belongs to Mitra, my heart belongs to you. Mitra became extremely irritated at Urvasi's words and cursed the Apsara to pass some time on earth. Mitra was first to discharge his semen into the celestial pitcher. As a result, the great sage, Agastya, rose from the vessel and said, O Mitra, I am your only begotten son. Saying this, Agastya went away. Then after Varuna discharged his semen into the pitcher, it mixed with the semen of Mitra. Thus from this mixture, Vashishta took birth. Meanwhile, after the death of Maharaj Nimi, the priest continued the sacrifice after preserving his body in oil. At the completion of the sacrifice, Bhrigu Muni utilized his mystic powers to invoke the soul of King Nimi. The demigods were very pleased with this act, and when they offered him a benediction, Maharaj Nimi requested, "O celestials, may I always reside in the eyes of all creatures." The demigods gave their consent, saying, "O king, you shall visit every eye in the form of air. Because of this, all creatures will be seen to blink periodically." The demigods departed, and thereafter the priests began to churn the body of King Nimi. Thus, Miti was born. Since he was born from a dead body, he was known as Videha, as well as Janaka. After narrating this story, Rama hastened to the royal assembly, eager to attend to the duties of state administration. There, Rama ordered Lakshman, "Go to the palace gate and bring me all those who have come with their petitions." Lakshman soon returned, saying, "O Lord, it appears that there is no one in the Koshala kingdom who is in need of anything." Rama, however, insisted, "Go again and look more carefully. I do not wish to be accused of the slightest neglect, nor do I want the least bit of irreligion to go undetected in my kingdom." Going out again, Lakshman then noticed a dog sitting near the palace gate, its head bleeding. While staring at Lakshman, the dog whined mournfully. Lakshman asked, "What is wrong? Why have you come here? Please do not fear, for you may tell me everything." The dog replied, "I wish to speak directly to Lord Rama, whose lotus feet award one fearlessness, and who is the shelter of the distressed." Lakshman then said, "If you have something to say, then you are welcome to come speak to the king himself." However, the dog replied, "I am a very low-born creature. I am unworthy of entering temples, the houses of Brahmins, or royal palaces. The king is the embodiment of all religious principles, the representation of all the demigods, and the benefactor of all living beings. Without Rama's special permission, I cannot dare come before him." When Lakshman reported the matter, Rama immediately commanded, "Whoever it may be, usher him in without delay." The dog then humbly came before Rama and said, "O Lord, the king is the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, he is the savior of all creatures. While others sleep peacefully, the king remains alert, always working for the welfare of his subjects. However, since everything depends on him, when the king is negligent, his subjects soon perish. The king is the upholder of religious principles and thus curbs the forces of evil. Those who follow religious principles experience happiness in this life and the next. Thus, the king receives great merit for sustaining Dharma. O Rama, you are the model of a religious king. With my head placed at your lotus feet, I seek your mercy. Do not become angry at what I have to say." Rama reassured the dog, saying, "Go on, speak without fear." Thus encouraged, the dog continued, "A mendicant Brahmin named Sarvata Siddha has injured my head, although there was no fault on my part." Immediately, Rama had his men summon Sarvata Siddha. Soon after, when the Brahmana came before him, Rama inquired, "Why did you strike this dog? What was his fault?" Anger is a deadly enemy. It is like a sharp sword that slashes away all of one's virtue. Anger nullifies one's long accumulated merit of austerity. Therefore, the wise rid themselves of anger by neglecting it in thought, speech, and actions. O Brahmana, one's true character cannot remain hidden, no matter how hard one tries to conceal it. Misdeeds will always betray those who have not conquered the forces of lust, anger, and greed. The Brahmana replied, "I was wandering about, begging for alms, when I came upon this dog squatting in the middle of the road, blocking my path. I told him, 'Make way,' but but he got up so slowly that I struck him over the head with my staff. I was famished, and my anger was easily aroused. O king, I admit my guilt. You should punish me as you see fit, just to save me from falling down into the hellish condition of life. Rama turned to his ministers and inquired, what should the punishment be? Justice must be done, for nothing instills more confidence in people's minds than the administration of fair punishment to wrongdoers. Brigu, Vashishta, Kasyapa, and other knowers of religious principles replied, a Brahmana is never to be punished. This is the unanimous opinion of those conversant with religious principles. Still, O Rama, you are the ultimate judge, for you are the Lord of the entire universe. You are Lord Vishnu himself. Thus, whatever is spoken by you is eternal religion. The dog interrupted, saying, O king, you have asked, what can I do for you? If you truly wish to please me, then kindly appoint this Brahmana to be the head of the Kalanjara monastery. Rama fulfilled the dog's request, and thus the delighted Brahmana, Sarvata Siddha, became honored as a spiritual leader and was placed atop a magnificently decorated elephant. The ministers, however, became greatly upset, protesting, O king, this cannot be considered a punishment. Rather than putting the Brahmana to shame, you have awarded him an exalted position? Rama replied, you do not understand the intricacies of karma, but the dog does. Prompted by Rama, the dog explained, in my last life, I was the head of the Kalanjara monastery. I duly worship the demigods and Brahmanas. I perform my sacred duties carefully and properly maintain the servants and maidservants. Still, regardless of so much care, trying to leave nothing undone, I took my next birth as a dog due to some unknown fault. Now, just consider this Brahmana, who cannot even control his anger. He is certainly unfit to be a spiritual leader. For his audacity in accepting such a position, he will now degrade 7 generations of his family. How can a man who is unable to control his temper be put in charge of Brahmanas, cows, and deity worship? Anyone who steals from the Brahmanas, demigods, women, or children is doomed, as if one who takes back a gift that was freely given. Indeed, even the very thought of stealing from the demigods and the Brahmanas will send a man to the lowest of hells. Saying this, the dog suddenly disappeared while Rama and the others sat with wide open eyes. Although previously born in a very high family, that living being had somehow been forced to accept the body of a dog. After leaving the royal court at Ayodhya, the dog gave up his life by abstaining from food and water with the hope of attaining a better birth. One day, while Rama was seated upon the royal throne, Sumantra informed him that some rishis headed by Syavana had come to see him. The sages were then escorted in, bearing gifts of fruit and water collected from the holy places. After worshipping the rishis, Rama inquired as to the purpose of their visit, assuring them he was prepared to execute their command. Syavana Muni replied, my dear Lord Rama, in the Satya Yuga, there was a most pious Daitya named Madhu, the son of Loka. Being very pleased with Madhu, Lord Shiva awarded him an invincible lance. Madhu then requested that all his descendants might also possess this lance, but Rudra explained that this was not possible. However, Lord Shiva at last agreed that the lance could be transferred to Madhu's son. Thus, at the time of his death, the Daitya handed over the weapon to his son, Lavanasura. O Rama, this offspring of Madhu is now residing in Madhuban. Because he has become very formidable, he is greatly oppressing the rishis. My dear Lord, you have already destroyed Ravana and his followers. We now beg you to please save us from the hands of Lavanasura. Rama replied, my dear rishis, Please give up all anxiety. I shall certainly kill this Rakshasa. Turning to his brothers, Rama inquired, shall I kill this demon myself? Or shall I allot the task to Bharata or Satruguna? Bharata then expressed his eagerness to slay the demon. However, Satruguna pleaded, my dear Rama, during your exile, Bharata had to suffer so greatly. Therefore, please grant me permission to destroy Lavanasura. Rama replied, O Satruguna, let it be so. Indeed, I shall crown you at once as king of Madhuvan. Hearing this, Satruguna felt most ashamed and protested, O Lord, it is not proper to install a younger brother as king in the presence of his older brother. However, your words cannot go in vain, and I must carry out your order. I now realize it was wrong to protest Bharata's request. It is unrighteous for a younger brother to oppose his elder brother's wishes. I must have been prompted to do so by my evil stars. Rama was pleased to hear Shatruguna speak this way. He then asked Lakshman and Bharata to arrange for their brother's coronation at once. Thereafter, when Shatruguna was crowned as the king of Madhuvan, he shone like the radiant sun. The rishis, headed by Syavana, were fully assured by this sight. Rama then said, my dear Shatruguna, it is Lavanasura's habit to keep his lance inside his house when he goes out to collect food. It is only when he is challenging to fight that he takes up his invincible weapon. Therefore, you must confront the demon when he is outside. When you do this, block his entrance so he may not go into his house. Take 4,000 horse soldiers, 2,000 chariot warriors, and 1,000 infantry with you. Let merchants also accompany you along with their wares, and bring actors and dancers. Likewise, take 1,000,000 gold coins to pay the soldiers' salaries. Proceed in a way that will disguise your motive, for only by intercepting him unaware and unarmed will you be able to emerge victorious. Shatruguna first dispatched his army, and then 1 month later he set out. After passing 2 nights on the way, Shatruguna reached the ashram of Valmiki during the 3rd day. Shatrugna, oh gosh, I've been saying it wrong, reached the ashram of Valmiki during the 3rd day. Shatrugna explained to Valmiki how he had been dispatched on a mission by the order of Lord Ram, and the rishi extended his hospitality to him. That night, Shatrugna remained at Valmiki's ashram. Sita gave birth to twin sons at midnight. Receiving the news from his disciples, Valmiki performed the birth rituals with kusha grass to ward off ghosts and rakshasas. Valmiki then directed some elderly people to rub the body of the firstborn child with the ends of kusha grass, and the younger twin with the lower end of kusha grass. Thus the elder boy became known as Kusha, and the younger boy as Lava, lower end. Shatrugna overheard the news and was very happy to know that twin boys were born to Rama and Sita. In the morning, Shatrugna set out, and after journeying for 7 days, he arrived at the ashram of Syavana Muni on the banks of the Jamuna River. That evening, as they were sitting at ease, Shatrugna inquired from Syavana Muni about the prowess of Lavanasura. The rishi replied, O prince, there was formerly a very powerful king in the dynasty of Ikshvaku named Mandata. This king was so ambitious that he made preparations for conquering the entire 3 worlds. As a consequence, even the demigods became afraid. Indra then approached Mandata and suggested, O king, You should first subjugate the entire earth before thinking of conquering heaven. With great surprise, Mandata inquired, "O Indra, where is that person on earth who has not come under my subjugation?" In reply, the king of heaven named Lavanasura, the son of Madhu, who resided at Madhuvan. Hearing this, Mandata angrily set out with his army. First, the king sent forth his envoy, but when the envoy arrived at Madhuvan, Lavanasura ate him up. In great rage, King Mandata challenged Lavanasura, who thus came outside of his city wielding his terrible lance. In an instant, that invincible weapon destroyed King Mandata, then returned to the hands of its owner. Therefore, my dear Shatrughna, you must be sure to challenge this demon when he is away from home, searching for food. The next morning, Lavanasura went to the forest to hunt for animals. In his absence, Shatrughna crossed the river Jamuna and then besieged the city of Madhuvan. At noon, when Lavanasura returned home bearing heaps of dead animals, he saw Shatrughna standing at the city gates. Lavanasura simply laughed with derision and said, "O fool, regardless of your audacity, all your weapons shall be of no avail. Indeed, it is my great fortune that you have arrived at my mealtime." Shatrughna challenged, "I am the younger brother of Lord Rama and Bharata, and my name is Shatrughna. I have come here to slay you as a just reward for your wicked deeds." Lavanasura again laughed heartily, saying, "Even though Rama killed Ravana, the brother of my aunt, Surpanaka, I merely excused him out of contempt, for I did not consider him worthy of my challenge." A fierce duel ensued between the two warriors. Then Lavanasura suddenly struck Shatrughna over the head with a large tree, causing him to fall unconscious on the ground. Thinking his adversary slain, Lavanasura picked up his animal carcasses and entered his city. However, within a moment, Shatrughna came to his senses. Standing up, he fixed a supremely powerful arrow upon his bowstring. Indeed, even the demigods were struck with fear upon seeing the terrible arrow. And they quickly sought the shelter of Lord Brahma. The Grandshire explained to them, "My dear celestials, with this arrow, Lord Vishnu formerly killed Madhu and Kaitaba. Rama has given this arrow to Shatrughna, knowing well that it would be put to use at this time. You should all go witness with your own eyes the death of this great demon." Shatrughna then released that wonderful arrow, and after soaring magnificently through the air, it pierced Lavanasura's heart, making him fall to the ground, dead. The victorious Shatrughna shone like the sun, and the demigods praised him for this wonderful achievement. Thereafter, Shatrughna settled at Madhuvan, residing there with his army and followers. He built a great city there called Madhupuri, which soon became highly prosperous. It was only after 12 years that Shatrughna at last decided to return to Ayodhya. When Shatrughna came to the ashram of Valmiki, he was very respectfully received by the rishi and offered ample hospitality. While congratulating Shatrughna for killing the terrible demon Lavanasura, Valmiki smelled his head repeatedly with great affection. After taking his meal, Shatrughna sat down to listen as Lava and Kusha recited Valmiki's composition of the Ramayana to the accompaniment of music. The poetic expressions were so enrapturing, and the descriptions of Lord Rama's transcendental pastimes so vivid that tears soon came to Shatrughna's eyes. Even the soldiers became entranced while hearing the history, for they appeared to be reenacted before their eyes in the ashram of Valmiki. One listener exclaimed, "How wonderful this reenactment is! It appears as though we are dreaming. My dear Shatrughna, please ask Valmiki, who has composed this wonderful song." Shatrughna replied, "My dear soldiers, we should not question the rishi about this, because many wonderful occurrences take place in his ashram. We should not be so astonished or express our curiosity unnecessarily." That night, while resting, Shatrughna could think of nothing other than the sweet lyrics describing the pastimes of his worshipful brother, Lord Ram. The next morning, Shatrughna departed and soon arrived at Ayodhya. Upon entering the royal palace, Shatrughna saw Rama, like a second Indra, surrounded by his ministers. Bowing before his elder brother, Shatrughna said, "My dear Rama, I have carried out your command and killed the wicked Lavanasura. Since that time, I have been residing at Madhupuri. By your mercy, it's become extremely prosperous. My dear brother, I am also grieved, having lived in separation from you for these past 12 years. Therefore, I beg you, give me permission to now reside in Ayodhya without going anywhere else in the future." Rama feelingly embraced Shatrughna and replied, "My dear brother, you should not speak like this. A heroic Kshatriya must not express such sorrow or feel any inconvenience while living in a distant kingdom. It's the duty of a king to rule over his subjects according to religious principles. You have to return to Madhupuri. I hope, of course, you may visit Ayodhya from time to time to see me. My dear Shatrughna, you are more dear to me than life itself. Therefore, please stay here for 7 days before setting out." With a sorrowful heart, Shatrughna assented, and after spending 7 days in Ayodhya, he left for his own kingdom. Once, an elderly Brahmana villager arrived at the gate of Rama's palace, bearing the body of his child. Delirious with grief, the old Brahmana cried out, "Oh, my son, my dear child, what terrible crime did I commit in my previous life to deserve the death of my only child? He was just a child, not yet 14, and now his mother and I shall die from grief. What wrong did I commit? I have never spoken a lie or injured either man or animal. Never before in the kingdom of Rama has a son died before his parents. Therefore, the death of my son must be due to some fault of Rama himself. It is well known that when the king becomes negligent in performing his duties, that such anomalies occur. O Rama, you must return my innocent son to me, or else my wife and I will give up our lives at your doorstep. In this way, you will become guilty of killing Brahmanas. O king, you claim to be a great ruler in the line of Ikshvaku. How will you be able to go on living happily when the great sins you have penetrated continue to haunt you?" Rama hurriedly summoned his advisors, Markandeya, Modgalya, Kashyapa, Katyayana, Jabali, Gautama, and Narada. After seating the great rishis and offering them respects, Rama informed them of the elderly Brahmana's accusations. To relieve the king's anxiety, Narada said, "O king, I shall disclose to you the reason for this child's death. Then you may act as you see fit. In the Satya Yuga, everyone was spiritually qualified, and by performing austerity, they achieved liberation from material bondage. In that golden age, wisdom was the rule, and there was no untimely deaths. Then, in the beginning of Treta Yuga, the 4 social divisions were created. The Kshatriyas were practically as qualified as the Brahmanas, and they were both allowed to perform austerities. In the Dwapara Yuga, irreligiosity will increase, and thus many irregularities will be introduced. As a concession, the Vaishyas will also be allowed to perform austerities, but the Shudras will be strictly forbidden to do so. Thereafter, even in the Kali Yuga, even Sudras will be allowed to perform austerities. Indeed, in that degraded age, there will be practically no qualified Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, or Vaishyas. O Rama, it is a serious offense for a Shudra to practice austerity in this Treta Yuga. It happens, however, that there is one Sudra in your kingdom executing very severe penances. He is the cause of this child's death. O king, irreligiosity is a state's worst enemy. Therefore, the ruler who fails to punish wrongdoers deserves to suffer in hell. You must find out this culprit at once, so that religious principles may be upheld, and the Brahmana's son may be restored to life. Pleased by this advice, Rama ordered Lakshman, go at once to the palace gate and tell the Brahmana to preserve the dead body of his child in a vat of oil, after supplying the necessary herbs. Rama then mentally summoned the Pushpaka chariot. Leaving Ayodhya in the care of Lakshman and Bharat, he departed to search for the culprit. Rama first flew over the western region, then north to the Himalayas. Finding no sign of irreligion, he next examined the eastern provinces and finally began searching in the south. There, near a great mountain and beside a large lake, Rama sighted an ascetic hanging head downward, engaged in executing severe penances. What great austerity! What fixed determination, Rama declared. Tell me, O formidable one, who are you and what is your caste? I am Rama, the son of Dasarath, and you have aroused my curiosity. For what purpose are you undergoing so much trouble? Are you seeking the heavenly planets, or have you some other goal? Are you a Brahmana, a heroic Kshatriya, a Vaishya, or a Sudra? Please, tell me the truth. From his awkward position, the ascetic replied, O illustrious king, my name is Shambhuka. I was born the son of a Sudra. Regardless of this handicap, I am performing austerities so that in my next life, I can attain the planets of the demigods. Shambhuka had hardly finished speaking when Rama's unsheathed his terrible sword and slashed off the Sudra's head. From the sky came shouts of, well done, excellent, as flowers rained down on all sides. Being exceedingly pleased, the demigods appeared before Rama and declared, O Lord, you have done us a great favor. By performing this noble act, you have ensured that this Sudra will not attain to heaven in violation of religious principles. With folded hands, Rama replied by requesting, the thousand-eyed Indra, O King of Heaven, if you are truly pleased with me, then kindly restore the Brahmana's son to life. It was due to my own fault that this boy died. I promised the Brahmana that I would restore his life. O best of the demigods, please allow my words to hold true. Indra happily replied, my dear Lord, certainly the child has already been revived and reunited with his parents. He regained his life as soon as the Sudra's head fell to the ground. Some years later, Rama decided to visit the sage Agastya, who had just completed executing austerities by living within water for 12 years. Wow. Accompanied by the demigods on the Pushpaka chariot, he arrived at the Rishi's ashram. Lord Rama then reverently bowed his head to the Rishi, who in turn received Rama with all due hospitality. Agastya said, my dear Lord, it is my great fortune that you have come here as my respected guest. Please honor me in return by accepting these golden ornaments manufactured long ago by Vishvakarma. Rama replied, "My dear Rishi, only Brahmanas are permitted to accept charity, not Kshatriyas. The only gift I may receive from you is your valuable words of instruction." Agastya said, "My dear Rama, in the Satya Yuga, there were no kings. Thus one day, the people went to Lord Brahma and requested him to assign them a ruler. In response, Lord Brahma called for the principal demigods and commanded them to donate various portions of their potencies. Thereafter, Lord Brahma sneezed, and from his nostrils was born a king named Kshupa. Lord Brahma endowed Kshupa with a portion of Indra's energy so that he could rule over the earth, a portion of Varuna's energy for the maintenance of his body, a portion of Kuvera's energy for possession of wealth, and a portion of Yamaraj's energy for chastising wrongdoers. My dear Lord Rama, in the same spirit, you should take these celestial ornaments from me." Rama replied, "My dear Rishi, I accept your words. I will accept the ornaments. Now please describe how you came to possess them." Agastya replied, "Long ago, during the present Treta Yuga, I performed penances in this vast forest. I originally entered the forest out of curiosity. Thus, I found a desolate, enchanting ashram. After passing the night there, however, I found a dead body laying on the ground. To my surprise, I was struck by the beauty of the corpse and stared at it for some time. Suddenly, a celestial chariot descended from the sky. Within it was an effulgent person surrounded by Gandharvas and Apsaras, who were singing and dancing. That splendorous person got down from the chariot and began to feed on the dead body. I was astonished to see this and asked him, 'Alas, how is it that you can do such an abominable act?' That person replied, 'Oh Rishi, my name is Sveta. I am the son of the illustrious Sudeva, and my brother is Sarata. After the death of my father, the citizens made me their king. Then, after ruling for a great while, I considered my duration of life was coming to an end. Thus I retired to the forest after installing my brother Sarata on the royal throne. Finally, after executing severe austerities for 3,000 years, I ascended to Brahmaloka. However, I was surprised to find that I was still afflicted by great pangs of hunger and thirst. I therefore inquired, 'My dear Lord Brahma, the residents of your supreme abode are free from such disturbances. How then am I suffering from hunger and thirst?' The Grandshire replied, 'O Sveta, although you performed penances for a long time, you never gave in charity. Thus, for this reason, you now suffer from hunger and thirst, even here in Brahmaloka. Now, to appease you, I ordain that human flesh shall be your meal. O king, you shall suffer the effects of this curse until you meet the great sage, Agastya.' Agastya then said, 'My dear Lord Ram, as arranged by destiny, I one day came to meet Sveta. In gratitude for being relieved from his distress, he begged me to accept these ornaments.' Rama inquired, 'My dear Rishi, why is it that this place where Sveta formerly performed austerities is devoid of all beasts and birds?' Agastya replied, 'My dear Rama, in the Satya Yuga, there lived a great king named Manu, who was the founder of the social system, consisting of the 4 occupational duties. Later, Manu's son, Ikshvaku, inherited the kingdom. In his turn, he begot 100 sons. The youngest son of Ikshvaku was very dull and never obeyed his brothers. Thus, he received the name Danda. Danda founded the kingdom that extends between Vindhya Mountains and the Shaivalya Mountains. His capital city was named Madhumantra, and Sukracharya became his sacrificial priest. One day, after having ruled over the kingdom for a long time, Danda went to visit the ashram of Shukra. Upon his arrival, he happened to see the rishi's beautiful daughter, Araja, loitering there alone. The very sight of her caused the king to immediately be overcome by lust. Danda forcibly embraced Araja and proceeded to gratify himself with her against her will. The king then returned to his capital. Soon thereafter, Shukra was informed by a disciple of what had happened. When he returned to his ashram, his daughter was there shedding tears. The rishi angrily cursed the king, saying, "Let Indra devastate Danda's entire kingdom by raining down dust for 7 days so that everything becomes buried and all creatures die." Shukra then ordered the residents of his ashram to leave that forest and commanded Araja to continue living there in trance. O Rama, Shukra's curse soon took effect, and from that time onward, this forest is known as Dandakaranya. Lord Rama passed the night at Agastya's ashram and the next morning departed for Ayodhya. Soon after his return, Lord Rama expressed his desire to perform the Rajasuya Yagya, an elaborate sacrifice that establishes who is the emperor of the world by subduing all the kings therein. Bharata said, "My dear elder brother, all the kings of the earth look upon you just like a father. Therefore, you should not do anything that will cause them to suffer. All of these kings are fully obedient to you, and thus you should not threaten them with destruction by performing this sacrifice." Lord Rama gladly accepted Bharata's advice. Lakshman then proposed that he perform a horse sacrifice instead. Lakshman cited how Indra formally became freed from all sinful reactions after slaying the Vritrasura by performing a horse sacrifice. In turn, Rama pointed out how Aila, the son of Kardama, regained his manhood by a similar sacrifice. I'm sorry if I'm saying any of the names wrong. Lord Rama had Lakshman call for the great rishis Vashishta, Vamadeva, Jabali, and Kasyapa. After receiving their approval, he sent out invitations to Sugriva, Vibhishan, and all other kings friendly to him. The challenge horse was then released to wander at will. Thereafter, the great sacrifice commenced at Namasharanya. As kings and princes poured in from all over the world, Bharata and Shatrughna received them with great hospitality. Sugriva and the other monkeys were assigned to look after entertainment, while Vibhishan and the other Rakshasas were assigned to attend to the comforts of the rishis. During the sacrificial performance, charity and food were distributed in profusion. No one could be seen who appeared to be neglected. Indeed, wealth and clothing were heaped as high as hills all around the sacrificial arena. Thus, the festivities continued for 1 full year as the challenge horse roamed the earth under the protection of Lakshman. Meanwhile, Valmiki called for Lava and Kusha and instructed them, "Please go out and continue reciting Ramayana throughout the land. Go to the homes of the Brahmanas and ashramas of rishis, and the palaces of great kings. Chant the Ramayana while wandering through the city streets and countryside. However, please first go to Ayodhya, where Rama is now engaged in performing a great horse sacrifice. If Rama invites you to chant before the assembled Brahmanas, please do so. Chant 20 chapters at a time, and do not accept any payment in return. Simply say, what good is gold for those who subsist upon fruits and roots? If Rama inquires, whose sons are you? Then reply, we are Valmiki's disciples. Chant the verses of Ramayana very sweetly, taking care that nothing displeases the king, for he is considered to be the father of all living beings. Lava and Kusha replied, we shall do as you say. That night they slept peacefully, with Valmiki's words firmly fixed in their hearts. Thereafter it came to pass that Lava and Kusha began to recite the epic Ramayana in the sacrificial arena at Ayodhya, accompanied by stringed instruments. Indeed, the two brothers had voices that made their recitations appear more melodious than the singing of the Gandharvas. The audience was enthralled by their artistry. Likewise, Rama listened intently, filled with great curiosity. Turning to one another, people remarked, except for their matted hair and deerskin dress, these boys exactly resembled Lord Rama himself. After listening to the first 20 chapters, Rama ordered Lakshman, give these noble-minded boys 20,000 gold coins, costly garments, and whatever else they desire. However, when Lakshman offered these rewards, Lava and Kusha refused, saying, what is the use of gold for ascetics who live on fruits and roots? Highly astonished, Rama inquired, how many parts are there in this epic poem, and which rishi composed it? The twins replied, O king, the great sage Valmiki is our spiritual master, and he is the author of this great literature that depicts the entire history of your life. The poem consists of 6 parts, and a 7th describes your concluding pastimes. If you desire, we shall recite the entire Ramayana during the period of your sacrifice. Thereafter, Rama listened with unbound pleasure as Lava and Kusha recited the Ramayana for many days. At last, Rama concluded, these boys must be the twin sons of Sita. There is no doubt of it. Rama's heart melted due to affection for his sons. After considering the matter very deeply, he called for messengers of impeccable etiquette. He ordered them, go at once to the ashram of the great sage Valmiki and speak to him the following words. If Sita is indeed blameless, if her character is faultlessly pure, then let her come here with your sanction so that she can prove her innocence before all the assembled citizens. O messenger, please hurry back with their replies. Let Sita come tomorrow at dawn and establish her purity in my presence. When Sita heard Rama's proposal, she could not comply, for she considered such a public trial a great humiliation. Thus, coming to a firm decision in her mind, Sita dressed herself in a reddish cloth and started for Ayodhya with Valmiki. A large crowd had assembled from all over the Koshala kingdom, for everyone was very curious to see Sita. Indeed, all of the demigods, headed by Lord Brahma, as well as the foremost rishis, nagas, siddhas, and other celestial beings came to witness the trial of Sita's purity. Finally, Valmiki arrived, followed by Sita, her head bent low, her hands joined in supplication. Tears filled her large eyes, and Lord Rama was firmly fixed in her heart. As the assembled citizens murmured in anticipation, Valmiki approached Lord Rama and said, O son of Dasarath, here is the impeccable, righteous Sita, whom you abandoned out of fear of public scandal. She has come here to prove her purity. Thus she awaits your command. O Rama, I, who have never uttered a lie, make the following declaration. If Sita is tainted by even the slightest guilt, then may the results of my accumulated austerities prove eternally fruitless. Quite a declaration. Although you love Sita deeply and were convinced of her innocence, you still discarded her out of fear of public opinion. By dint of my spiritual vision, I can understand Sita's complete purity. Thus, I have come to proclaim this truth to you. Rama gazed upon Sita for a moment and announced to the assembly, "So be it. I accept all the great Rishi has said. Previously, the demigods also testified as to Sita's purity, and I happily took her back to Ayodhya. However, people began to criticize me, and thus, with great reluctance, I sent her away. Now I've decided that if Sita can prove her innocence before this assembly, then I shall again accept her as the wife I dearly love." Everyone fell silent, and all eyes became fixed upon Sita, who stood with her gaze lowered and her head bent slightly downward. After a short pause, Sita said to the assembly, "O goddess of the earth, please hear my petition. If since the time of my marriage I ever thought of anyone but Rama, or if I have ever loved any man but Rama, then refuse me shelter. However, if I have only dwelt in Rama in thought, word, and action, then please give me a place within you, so I need not experience the shame of facing these slanderous people." While Sita spoke, the earth suddenly opened up, and from the crevice, the goddess Bhumi majestically rose up, seated upon a golden throne borne by divine serpents. The goddess welcomed Sita, took her in her arms, and seated her at her side on the throne. Then, while from the sky and from the earth, the demigods and the rishis, kings and common people, looked on in astonishment, the celestial throne slowly descended into the bowels of the earth. There was an uproar as all beings uttered exclamations of wonder, praising Sita for this glorious confirmation of her purity. From the heavens, the demigods rained down showers of flowers, and there was singing, dancing, and playing of musical instruments. After Sita disappeared from sight, tears welled up in Rama's eyes, and anger flared within his mind. Rama lowered his head and declared, "Earth, I order you return my Sita immediately. Open up and bring her here so we may again be united. Sita is your daughter, and I am your son-in-law. Give me Sita without delay, or I will crush your mountains, burn your forests, and smash you into atoms." Lord Brahma then spoke to appease the raving, tortured Rama. "O Lord, please remember your identity. You are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, and Sita is the goddess of fortune herself. Sita has now entered the planet of the Nagas, and very shortly she will be reunited with you in your transcendental abode, Vaikuntha. O Supreme Hero, Lord of the universe and maintainer of all that lives, why must I remind you of your divine position? O Rama, give up your grief and hear from your sons the concluding portion of the great narration that describes your transcendental pastimes. This epic poem, composed by Valmiki, will spread your glories throughout the three worlds for as long as the universe continues to exist." Saying this, Lord Brahma disappeared. Wow. Rama went to Valmiki's ashram with Lava and Kusha after passing the night grieving over the loss of Sita. Rama summoned all the rishis and requested his son to recite the Uttarakanda of the Ramayana. Thereafter, Rama returned to Ayodhya, but found life barren without his beloved Sita. Rama continued to rule over the kingdom strictly according to religious principles. Thus the rains showered forth regularly, crops were abundant, and everywhere were seen signs of prosperity. Then, after the passage of many years, Kaushalya passed away, then Sumitra, then Kaikeyi, so that they all became reunited with Maharaj Dasarath in the transcendental realm. Sometime thereafter, Yudhajit, the king of Kaikeya, came to see Lord Ram at Ayodhya, requesting him to conquer the Gandharva king who resided north of the river of Indus. Rama immediately appointed Bharata's two sons, Taksha and Pushkala, as rulers of the Gandharva kingdom. Bharata then proceeded with a large army and established Taksha in Takshasila and Pushkala in Pushkalavati. Finally, after 5 years passed, Bharata returned to Ayodhya. Rama then made Lakshman's two sons, Angada and Chandraketu, the rulers of Karupata. After bringing that territory under subjugation, Lakshman had accompanied his two sons and returned to Ayodhya after an absence of 1 year. Since the closing of Lord Rama's earthly pastimes was close at hand, time personified came to Ayodhya one day in the guise of a wandering ascetic. After arriving at the palace, time announced to Lakshman, "I am a messenger from Lord Brahma. Since I have come on a very important mission, I desire to see Lord Rama at once." When time, in the form of a dazzling, effulgent rishi, entered the palace, Rama respectfully seated him upon a golden throne and inquired, "O Holy One, what is the nature of your visit? Is there some message you have come to deliver?" The messenger replied, "O King, if you honor the wishes of Lord Brahma, then our meeting must be held in private, for his words are not meant for others. Indeed, let it be known for certain that anyone who overhears our conversation will soon meet with death. O Rama, you must promise that if anyone comes and interrupts our meeting, then you will unhesitantly give up all connections with him." Rama replied, "Let it be so." To Lakshman he ordered, "Dismiss the doorman. I want you to personally guard the entrance, for this meeting must be strictly private." Thereafter, when the two were alone, Death, in the form of a messenger, said, "In a previous birth, I was a son of Lord Brahma. Now I am appearing as all-devouring, eternal time, Kala. O King, the universal grandsire speaks unto you the following words. O Lord Rama, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, I offer my obeisances unto you. After the dissolution of the universe, you slept in the waters of devastation in the form of Garbhodakshai Vishnu. Then, when there is need of recreating in the universe as it was before, I, Lord Brahma, take birth from the effulgent lotus that grows from your navel. After my birth, I was entrusted with the creation of the three worlds. In turn, I requested you to assume the form of Kishoridaksha Vishnu, to become the maintainer of the universe. Ever since that time, you have appeared in many transcendental forms, whenever there is a need to relieve the burden of this world. You have appeared to kill Ravana and rule over the earth for 11,000 years. O Lord, since this allotted time is now concluded, you need no longer remain within this material world. If you so desire, you may once again ascend to the heaven to resume your rule over the demigods. O all-pervading Supreme Personality of Godhead, you are the source of my strength and my very existence. Let me therefore offer my respectful obeisances unto you." After listening to Kala, Rama smiled and replied, "You have spoken truthfully. May there be all good fortune for you. You may now go and tell Lord Brahma that because I have fulfilled the purpose of the demigods, I will very soon return to my own transcendental abode." As Rama and the messenger were conversing, It happened that Durvasa Muni arrived at the royal palace. When Lakshman went to receive him, the rishi insisted, "I am here on most urgent business and must see Lord Rama at once." Lakshman replied, "Rama has given me strict orders that he cannot be interrupted under any circumstance. O foremost of rishis, please be patient and wait for a short while." At this, Durvasa lost his temper. With fiery eyes, he screamed, "Go and announce my presence at once. If you are so foolish to disobey me, then I shall curse Rama, Bharata, yourself, and the entire Ikshvaku dynasty and the entire Koshala kingdom. Hurry, for my patience wears thin." Lakshman knew that to interrupt Rama's conversation with Kala would soon bring about his own death. However, thinking of Durvasa's course, he concluded, "It's better that if I suffer alone, rather than cause everyone's ruination." Lakshman then entered the room. Being informed of Durvasa's arrival, Rama took leave of Kala and hurriedly went out to meet the rishi. As he stood before Durvasa Muni with folded hands, Rama inquired, "O foremost of ascetic brahmanas, what can I do to please you?" Durvasa replied, "O righteous king, I have just now completed a 1,000-year fast. What can you give me to eat?" Thereafter, Rama provided Durvasa with a sumptuous feast, and the rishi was highly gratified. After Durvasa's departure, however, Rama remembered the promise he had made to Kala. Thus, a horrible grief overtook him. Fearing the loss of his most intimate associate, Rama stood as though deprived of reason, his head bowed in dejection. Lakshman then approached his aggrieved brother and cheerfully said, "O Rama, do not lament, for that which is inevitable under the control of supreme destiny. Duty must be carried out without attachment or aversion. Therefore, keep your promise and banish me without hesitation." Rama summoned his ministers, and after describing all that had happened, he asked for their advice. Finally, after a long silence, Vashishta said, "My dear Rama, by dint of my aesthetic prowess, I could foresee all this happening to you. Now you must keep your promise, otherwise your life-long adherence to righteousness will be blighted. With the decay of religious principles, the world gradually comes to perish. Therefore, adhere to truthfulness and banish Lakshman." Rama appeared to think deeply over the matter. Then he announced to the assembly, "Adhering to righteousness, I hereby order the banishment of Lakshman from Ayodhya." The ministers all applauded Rama's decision, and thereafter Lakshman went to the banks of the river Sarayu and absorbed his mind in the practice of mystic yoga. Then, when the time became ripe, King Indra suddenly appeared there, riding a celestial chariot. Thus, in his self-same transcendental body, Lakshman ascended to heaven amidst the singing of Gandharvas, the dancing of Apsaras, and the showers of fragrant flowers. After Lakshman's disappearance, Rama decided to install Bharata upon the royal throne so that he could be free to follow the Lakshmana's path. However, Bharata refused to occupy the throne, for he preferred to accompany Rama to the forest rather than enjoy the kingdom without him. Rama then divided the kingdom between his sons, giving Kusha the northern part of Koshala and Lava the southern part. After the coronation, Rama embraced his twin sons and then presented them vast amounts of gold, jewels, thousands of chariots, and countless horses and elephants. When the citizens heard of Rama's intention to retire to the forest, they became determined to follow him. Their grief due to the impending separation was unbearable. Shatrughna was also intent upon following Rama, and thus when the Lord finally came out of the city, there was a great procession following him. Indeed, because of their love and devotion, every living entity followed Rama to the forest, so that not even an animal could be seen in Ayodhya. While Rama silently walked along, everyone could see that he was exhibiting a mood of complete detachment and indifference, as if preparing to give up the world. All of Rama's potencies appeared in personified form to accompany him. Shri walked on Rama's right side and Bhumi on his left side. Shakti walked in front, and innumerable other energies. Shakti walked in front, and innumerable other energies followed Rama, including Omkar, Gayatri, and the Vedas. Next, Shatrughna and his family followed Bharata. Then came the Brahmanas who tended the sacrificial fire. Behind the Brahmanas walked all the citizens according to their positions. Following them came all the animals. When he arrived at the banks of the river Sarayu, Rama paused. At that time, Lord Brahma and the demigods appeared overhead in their celestial chariots. The sky was thus lit up with a transcendental radiance, and gentle, sweet-smelling breezes began to blow. The Gandharvas and Apsaras sang and danced, and the demigods showered the most fragrant of celestial flowers. As Lord Rama entered the water, Lord Brahma offered his prayers as follows. O Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, you are now concluding your earthly pastimes and are preparing to return to your transcendental abode beyond this material world. You are the eternal Lord Vishnu, and although you appear in various incarnations, your body is unchanging and original. It is you alone who are the cause of all causes and the support of all existence. Everything is thus part and parcel of you, and you are the supreme absolute truth, the source of all emanation. O Lord, you've so kindly appeared to remove the burden of the earth. Thus, let us offer our respectful obeisances unto you again and again. Followed by Bharata and Shatrughna, Lord Rama thus returned to his eternal abode in the spiritual sky. Indeed, not only the sons of Dasarath, but all their followers attained the Vaikuntha planet where Lord Rama eternally resides. This concludes the transcendental narration of the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Ramachandra, known as the Ramayana, composed by the great Rishi and the devotee Valmiki. Haribol! This epic should only be recited by those who have implicit faith in the Supreme Lord, for it is non-different from Lord Vishnu himself. Hearing even a single verse has the potency to eradicate all sins committed by a person that day. Therefore, those who seek liberation from the cycle of repeated birth and death always relish this great transcendental literature. The recitation of the Ramayana grants one all the fruits of Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. Beyond that, it helps one to advance towards life's ultimate goal, the development of love of Godhead. May the readers of this book thus become blessed and inspired in Krishna consciousness. May the transcendental forms of Lord Ramachandra and Sita forever remain situated within their hearts. Om Tat Sat. Wow. Oh, it is really amazing. I feel so blessed and unqualified to have finished up this reading of the Ramayana. It's such an epic tale. So should we open it up for, I don't even know what time it is. Oh, we have 8 minutes. Sorry if I read too slow or something, but there's a little time if anyone wants to have a comment.
Thank you so much, Mataji. This is Shraddha for the fantastic reading. Yeah, and isn't it amazing that although we were not there when Ramchandra was there, assuming, but still when we read this pastimes, we feel that separation. And I could see that in your voice as you were reading from there, that, and that's the effect of the katha. So thank you so much for
so much
sharing.
separation in this kata that we're all feeling, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. So I'm just wondering, there's an appendix also. I'm just being greedy. There's
Oh,
an
yeah.
appendix. If there are 8 minutes, can you?
Yeah, sure. It's just a few pages. Should we read it? Is it okay?
Sure, Mataji, please.
Okay. Let me have
Thank
one.
you.
Sorry. This is great. Yes. Okay, so I'll keep reading the appendix. Srila Prabhupada on the position of Lord Ramachandra and purposes for his advent. Compiled from Srila Prabhupada's translation and commentary of the Srimad Bhagavatam, 9th Canto. The personality of Godhead Sri Rama assumed the form of a human being and appeared on the earth for the purpose of doing some pleasing work for the demigods or the administrative personalities to maintain the order of the universe. Sometimes great demons and atheists like Ravana in Hiranyakashipu and many others become very famous due to advancing material civilization by the help of material science and other activities, with a spirit of challenging the established order of the Lord. For example, the attempt to fly to other planets by material means is a challenge to the established order. The conditions of each and every planet are different, and different classes of human beings are accommodated there for particular purposes mentioned in the codes of the Lord. But puffed up by tiny success in material advancement, sometimes the godless materialists challenge the existence of God. Ravana was one of them, and he wanted to deport ordinary men to the planet of Indra, heaven, by material means without consideration of the necessary qualifications. He wanted a staircase to be built up directly reaching the heavenly planet so that people might not be required to undergo the routine of pious work necessary to enter that planet. He also wanted to perform other acts against the established rule of the Lord. He even challenged the authority of Sri Rama, the personality of Godhead, and kidnapped his wife Sita. Of course, Lord Rama came to chastise this atheist, answering the prayer and desire of the demigods. He therefore took up the challenge of Ravana, and the complete activity is the subject of matter of the Ramayana. Because Lord Ramachandra was the personality of Godhead, he exhibited superhuman activities which no human being, including the material advanced Ravana, could perform. Lord Ramachandra prepared a royal road on the Indian Ocean with stones that floated on the water. The modern scientists have done research in the area of weightlessness, but it is not possible to bring in weightlessness anywhere and everywhere. But because weightlessness is the creation of the Lord, by which he can make the gigantic planets fly and float in the air, he made the stones even within this earth to be weightless and prepared a stone bridge on the sea without any supporting pillar. That is the display of the power of God. Due to his causeless mercy upon all living entities, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, along with his plenary extensions, appeared in the family of Maharaj Ikshvaku as the Lord of Sita, his internal potency. Under the order of his father, Maharaj Dasrath, he entered the forest and lived there for considerable years with his wife and younger brother. The powerful Rakshasa Ravana committed a great offense against him and was thus ultimately vanquished. Lord Rama is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and his brothers, namely Bharata, Lakshman, and Shatrughna, are his plenary expansions. All 4 brothers are Vishnu Tattva. They were never ordinary human beings. There are many unscrupulous and ignorant commentators on Ramayana who present the younger brothers of Lord Ramachandra as ordinary living entities. But Srimad Bhagavatam, the most authentic scripture on the science of Godhead, clearly states that his brothers were his plenary expansions. Lord Ramachandra is the incarnation of Vasudev. Lakshman is the incarnation of Sankarshan. Bharata is the incarnation of Pradyumna, and Shatrughna is the incarnation of Aniruddha, all expansions of the personality of Godhead. Lakshmi Ji Sita is the internal potency of the Lord. She is neither an ordinary woman nor an incarnation of Durga. Durga is the external potency of the Lord, and she is associated with Lord Shiva. The question may be asked, why the Lord, who is omnipotent, comes here to diminish the burden created upon the world by the unscrupulous kingly order? Certainly, the Lord does not need to come here personally for such purposes, but he actually descends to exhibit his transcendental activities in order to encourage his pure devotees who want to enjoy life by chanting the glories of the Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita 9:13-14, it is stated that the Mahatmas, great devotees of the Lord, take pleasure in chanting of the activities of the Lord. All Vedic literatures are meant for turning one's attention towards the Lord and his transcendental activities. Thus, these activities of the Lord in his dealings with worldly people create a subject matter for discussion by his pure devotees. When the Lord appears in this universe in the form of a human being, he has 2 purposes, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita 4:8. Paritranaya sarunam vinasaya cha dushkritam, to destroy the demons and to protect the devotees. To protect the devotees, the Lord not only satisfies them by his personal presence, but also teaches them so that they will not fall down from devotional service. By his personal example, Lord Ramachandra taught the devotees that it is better not to enter married life, which is certainly followed by many tribulations, and as confirmed in the Srimad Bhagavatam 7:9-45. Kripanas, those who are not advanced in spiritual knowledge and who are therefore just the opposite of brahmanas, generally take to family life, which is a concession for sex. Thus they enjoy sex again and again, although that sex is followed by many tribulations. This is a warning to devotees. To teach this lesson to devotees and to human society in general, Lord Sri Ramachandra, although the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself, underwent a series of tribulations because he accepted a wife, Mother Sita. Lord Ramachandra underwent these austerities, of course, only to instruct us. Actually, he never has any reason to lament for anything. Another aspect of the Lord's instructions is that one who accepts a wife must be a faithful husband and give her full protection. Human society is divided into 2 classes of men: those who strictly follow the religious principles and those who are devotees. By his personal example, Lord Ramachandra wanted to instruct both of them how to fully adopt the discipline of the religious system and how to be a beloved and dutiful husband. Otherwise, he had no reason to undergo apparent tribulations. One who strictly follows religious principles must not neglect to provide all facilities for the complete protection of his wife. There may be some suffering because of this, but one must nevertheless endure it. That is the duty of a faithful husband. By his personal example, Lord Ramachandra demonstrated this duty. Lord Ramachandra could have produced hundreds and thousands of sitas from his pleasure energy. But just to show the duty of a faithful husband, he not only rescued Sita from the hands of Ravana, but also killed Ravana and all the members of his family. Another aspect of the teachings of Lord Ramachandra is that although Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and his devotees may apparently suffer from material tribulations, they have nothing to do with such tribulations. They are mukta purushas, liberated persons, under all circumstances. A Vaishnava is always firmly situated in transcendental bliss because of engagement in devotional service. Although he may appear to suffer material pains, his position is called transcendental bliss and separation. The emotions of a lover and beloved feel when separated from one another are actually very blissful, although apparently painful. Therefore, the separation of Lord Ramachandra from Sita Devi, as well as the consequent tribulation they suffered, is but another display of transcendental bliss. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.
Jai. Thank you, Mataji.
Please forgive me for any mispronunciations or my inability to read clearly. Wonderful pastime. Now do we, anybody else have anything to say? Now it's 5 minutes past time.
On that
This
note,
was
we
like-
can on that we can actually end anytime, Mataji, if you want.
Okay. I'm not really familiar with Zoom. Do I just end? Good night. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Mataji. Thank you so much for the wonderful, wonderful reading, and the appendix was like the icing on the cake. We got that extra bonus, which is always relishable. So thank you so much, and I really enjoyed listening to you. And of course, there were no flaws, no mispronunciation. It was just it was so engaging, the reading. So thank you so much. And
Patient.